It took me so long to actually see what was going on, to realize I was involved with an unstable individual. We have all been in denial at one point of time, right? But I felt like I became accustomed to the dysfunctionalism. It was normal, like a part of me accepted it. Studies have shown that there are 4 different types of these people, split into categories. But you would have to experience this firsthand to understand the severity. The sad truth is, I got relief from them still being there despite my misery because I didn't want to be alone. It was to the point where physically I would get sick. Looking at how my body would respond moments before, during, and after an explosive fight, my nervous system turned to shits as soon as his mouth would open, and mostly that feeling of isolation after being discarded time and time again. Racking my brains, questioning myself, trying to figure out how one could lack so much empathy towards me, and even more towards our kids. I got tired of covering for him. I got tired of suppressing my pain. It was a repeated cycle for years. I knew something wasn't right. Things just weren't adding up. There were too many cons. So upon doing research and seeking therapy for my own sanity, because I was convinced I was a problem, I then realized I was dealing with the narcissist, someone with a serious personality disorder that makes relationships challenging if not impossible. And I just wanted to put a quick disclaimer. I'm not a professional nor a doctor. I'm a survivor and this is my story. Coming into the relationship, there weren't too many red flags that I observed. It was almost a too good to be true type of connection. As expected, this person was charming, calm, patient, and very consistent. Perfect choice of words that I needed to hear, great listener, and very attentive to my needs. It was exactly what I waited for. It was 2 years since I was in a serious relationship. I didn't know if I was ready, but I knew I needed to fill a void. It was comfort for me, and I didn't know how broken I still was moving forward with this relationship. Over time of being comfortable with one another, I started noticing things that made me rethink the relationship. Certain comments that were being made me feel very concerned, very jealous and obsessive, that later on turned into uncontrollable lashing out tantrums, like a baby who didn't get their way. But no one's seen this side of him, just me. I had high hopes that it wouldn't last, but unfortunately, it never stopped. There wasn't a time where I was ever really apart from this person throughout my days. Wherever I went, he went, and it was great in the beginning until I started to feel smothered. It became an obsession, and it became unhealthy. I would be accused of doing things or accused of things that weren't true if they weren't with him. They would go from showering me with sweet sayings on a daily and how much they loved and adored and couldn't live without me to almost like when you flip the switch and be a completely different person. I saw anger. I saw rage. I saw hurt within. His truth slowly started to unravel right in front of me. The arguments began to get more severe. For punishment, they would leave me for days, ignore, and allow me to have no access until they felt like they wanted to talk to me again. I believe they took joy in humiliating me and putting me down so that I would think I was the problem. Over time of being shamed, I wasn't capable of love. I was unworthy. I was crazy. My past trauma was the cause. I was the issue. I became the root of the failed relationship. It was always me. It was expressed so much that I thought it was me. I lost myself. I really started to believe it. I didn't remember who I was. I just knew I was slowly dying inside. I knew I didn't want to feel this anymore. I knew it didn't feel good. But I felt guilty every single time because he would always point out the things that he did do for me, like sticking by my side and always being there for me when I needed him. And it made me stay, even when I wanted to run. I was hiding it from a lot of my family. I was ashamed, and I just tried to internalize it, hoping that things would just be better the next day, that we just having a bad patch. It's gonna get better. This happens in relationships. But I was in denial. I didn't want to face the reality of what it would feel like being by myself. But I didn't know why it was so hard to leave. Gaslighting was a constant thing. I was so confused that I dealt with it, not realizing how toxic these patterns were. The sense of entitlement is very big for narcissists. They would go from showering me with sweet sayings and how much they loved me and couldn't live without me. And then like a flick of a switch, and be a completely different person. I saw anger. I seen rage. I seen a broken person. And the mask slowly started to come off. I seen him for who he truly was. They need constant reassurance. No accountability can be placed. A sense of importance is what they need to keep going. And an apology was always demanded to feel in control. But it was always one-sided. It was always me giving in. My biggest mistake was opening up the way I did, sharing my life, my struggles, because I was always targeted as to why things were so bad. Even when it wasn't me, it became me, because he would deflect or bring up something I had said in the past to make his point valid in the end. I was always that horrible person. Even if he was the cause, it was always flipped and turned around somehow on me. My traumas were always thrown in my face, which would trigger me, and God forbid I react to the thing that was said to trigger me. It would be hell for me to pay. The disappearing acts would start again. His behavior started to get out of control. The mask was finally off. I seen him for who he was. The fighting started off with just me and him, but then it got so bad that he did it in front of the kids with no regard. Strangers, disrespecting family, even in public places, wherever he could, he would. He didn't care how he looked or how it affected me. Empathy is what he lacks. He'd vanish and I wouldn't have the slightest place where to look for him. It became normal to the point that he kept a packed bag. That bag was his escape. It was a trigger for me though, because I never knew when he was going to pick up that bag and leave again. And I had to explain to my kids time and time. It was done so frequently, I started to accept it. I accepted things that I never thought I would accept. And then there were times I would be vulnerable and try to call everyone I knew that had contact with him to ask him to come home. I would plead and reassure him and apologize that things would be different just so he would come back. And my kids would be okay. And I did it one too many times. I had enough. Tired of getting the life sucked out of me. Tired of being spoken to like I'm shit. Tired of the verbal abuse. And most of all, I was tired of carrying all the weight on me. His weight. His insecurities. His problems. No one deserves this. Toxic people are controlling, manipulative, and emotionally abusive. A narcissist will use gaslighting to make you feel confused and insecure. They will use every opportunity to shame you, isolate you from other people, and always play victim. And I was always left feeling guilty. And although I did this and I stuck it out for my kids because I wanted to break cycles for 11 years, I wanted to prove and convince myself that I could do this, I could work it out. And as we know, people can and do change. I thought to myself, if I can change and I've gotten through so many tough times in my life, then so can he. But I wanted to be better. You have to want to be better for self. And I realized that that's a weakness for a narcissist. They sabotage any possibility of looking deep within. They'll run. Them, they can't have anything wrong with them. The slightest conductive criticism or suggestions angers them because they do no wrong. The moment that the narcissist would feel small, the aggressive behavior, the vulgarity, shaming, and bashing allows them to feel big. And that's what keeps them going. And it's very sad. That's how they function with no self-awareness. My feelings were always invalid. They never mattered. I could never get my point across without him bringing up my mental health, or I'm too sensitive, let me guess you're having another breakdown. Just hurtful words, things that stuck, things that held weight. And it was my job to give in and make him feel important, cater to his needs, agree with him, or else it was an argument that would never stop. Until I would break, no longer could find it in me to be strong. He knew all my triggers, he knew all my weaknesses, and it brought him complete joy to see me down because that's what made him feel superior. And now he's won. And the moment he seen I was folding, he would try to console me right after all he just did seconds before. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. It is not normal behavior. So many lies and bullshit. I started to catch on to his tactics. I knew what was going to happen before it happened because it became his normal behavior. He could no longer hide it. I became angry, very angry. I resented him. I wanted out. But I was so afraid of what out looked like by myself. Every day it just became harder to even cope. Just his energy all around because I just didn't know how he was going to come across. I started to shut down, afraid to even ask him basic questions. I didn't know how he was going to respond. Most times, if it wasn't something he wanted to hear, he'd blow up. So I just kept silent to avoid all interactions. It went from a person I trusted with all of my emotions, a person I trusted with my heart, to a person I didn't even recognize, someone I wanted to get far away from. His presence was so dark. My spirit was constantly bothered. I just couldn't. Once I see my kids were being affected, I knew that I had to make some serious changes, do some digging within myself, because this is not the way anybody's supposed to live. And I've realized dealing with this and going through this, I was never really actually loved. I don't know if it's even possible for them to love anybody else because they're so damaged within themselves. They are so insecure and they have so many dark rooted things that they choose not to dive into, which leads them and allows them to stay the way they are. But I just know that this is not a healthy relationship. This is not what love is. This is not what love feels like. And if it is, I want no parts. No one deserves this. And although I did this and I stuck it out for my kids because I wanted to break cycles and I wanted to prove and convince myself that I could do this, I could work it out, I love my kids more than life itself. But I have to learn to re-love me first.
Simply Michelle.